Jeremy, welcome to Locked In, man. Pleasure having you. You're friends with Travis Cullen.
I am.
Another Fort Dix person on the show. Everyone's hearing about Fort Dix lately.
I know. Well, it is definitely like, I feel like it's the prison of prisons. Even in prison, everybody wants to end up at Fort Dix because they hear how crazy it is. Like, there's phones, there's everything going on there.
Yeah, it really is crazy. When I first started the podcast, I kept talking about it and I couldn't find anyone that wanted to come on about it, and now it's flooded with Fort Dix people.
Oh yeah, well, you had to wait for him to get out. That was the problem.
That really what it was. It probably was.
Yeah,
because a lot of you guys had just gotten out recently in the last year or two ago.
Absolutely. And Fort Dix is oh my goodness, it's like a third world country. They actually shut down 03 on the west side because it was like falling apart that bad that it's got to be pretty bad when they're like, all right, nobody can live here.
I still can't believe it's a prison. Just like the whole, it's nuts to me. I'm still mind blown.
You know what the craziest part to me is to think that like people signed up to go live there before it was the prison. You know what I'm saying? Like, people were like, oh, join the military, and got sent there and just lived there willingly for like a while, you know?
Yeah. It's so funny seeing some comments and people will be like, that's a military base. It's not a prison. It's like, it was an old military base
Yeah.
and the new one is right next to it.
Exactly. And now, yeah, it's, They got it going on there. There for sure.
So you brought your book with us for us today. I actually already had a copy thanks to Travis.
You did.
See, Travis is like the biggest hype man for anyone.
He is.
If he likes you, he's your number one fan.
Travis is my boy. freedthc.com. That's his website. He is my boy for sure. He's opinionated sometimes. Gets a little heated, gets a little into it, but he's a good dude. He's got a good heart. We share this, the free all cannabis prisoners in common. Mm-hmm. He went to prison for weed. I went to prison for weed. Obviously, in the current climate we're in, we just think it's really, I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's like the most obvious human right violation we really have in this country is that people are making millions and millions of dollars. 70% of people think it's legal, and that the people that got it to that point are still sitting in prison for it. Because the way I see it is they were always wrong about it. And it's like if they made avocados illegal tomorrow, right? Like, a lot of people will be like, well, why were avocados illegal? It's like, well, I don't know. They are. You just have to follow the rules, right? Well, if no one ever challenges that rule, no one's ever going to eat avocados again. So there has to be people that break the rules to get the rules to ever change. So now you have legal weed, you have people making millions of dollars, generational wealth, all of those things, but you still have the people that laid the foundation for that rotting in prison cells, serving life sentence, serving 40 years. So actually, that's another thing I don't think I told you. Edwin Rubis, who called in when Travis was here, he is supposed to call in at 12:30, and we'll hear from him as well. He's currently serving a 40-year sentence for cannabis. Mm-hmm. He was sentenced under Biden's crime bill in the 90s that Biden got passed. That basically back then it was just straight extortion. If you didn't tell, they were just going to slam you, which it's not so different these days, but it's a little bit better. So he got 40 years as he never got caught with any weed, anything. It was just two people said he was involved, that situation, and he took it to trial, lost 40 years.
And these are also non-violent cases.
Yes,
that's what you guys are advocating for.
So the Organized Last Prisoner Project, they actually they vet everybody who applies, basically. And if you have, it's not even only on your crime, if you have any violence in your history at all. So if you have some domestic violence charge from, it doesn't matter, it can be 20 years ago, stuff like that. They really try to make sure that everybody that they're asking, because we're on a push for clemency right now. We're really trying to get Biden to fulfill his campaign promise to release all cannabis prisoners. We're dead set on countdown for clemency and holding him accountable to that promise. And him, he did the federal simple possession pardons, which let 0 people out of prison. It's literally a publicity stunt. And so we're really trying to call him out, that he needs to, especially someone like Edwin Rubis, who he was responsible for putting that man in prison as a nonviolent first-time cannabis offender, 40 years. And he got less time than the people that at the top of his case. So you know what I mean? Like it was like one of those where he's just the random guy that gets left out.
Well, even more notable is he gets more time than sex offenders running around at Fort Dix.
yes.
There's guys on their second sex offense charge that will get like a 5-piece and then a 10-piece, and that equals way less than 40 years.
Way less than 40 years. Yeah. And so, you know, it's we feel like it's our response, especially me, having served 4 years in federal prison for cannabis. So I know what it's like to go to sleep every night in a state where weed is legal in New Jersey, and I'm sitting in federal prison for it when there's dispensaries right down the street. You know what I mean? So, and you know, when you're in prison, everybody's in there together. Like we're all inmates. Like I'm definitely like, that's just how I am always going to see the world, because I'm labeled. I have the F attached to me. I'm a felon. So it is what it is. You know what I mean? So we all are together on that. But even when I was in there, I always felt like guys who are just in there for, because there's kind of a difference. Like there's guys who, for me, and this is just my personal opinion, like there's a difference between, you know, believing in cannabis as a medicine, as like it's a good thing for people to do, as alternative to alcohol, as alternative to other prescription drugs, all those things. It's just what I believe. It's my belief. That's why I didn't sell other drugs, because I have a firm belief in cannabis. So that's why it was, you know, very much like I was a weed only, like that's all I dealt with. That being said, like I use other drugs. I'm not against. In fact, this novel is centered around the concept of legalizing all drugs. But the cannabis to me is like, to be in prison for that while people are making generational wealth. It's wrong. Like it's a right or wrong issue. And to have it then become politicized, where now like it's like, you know, they're kind of trying to take bites of like I'm for legalization, or and while these guys just sit in prison. For me, it's just like, I'm done listening to you guys talk about it. Like it's time to get these people home to their families. They don't deserve to be there. I sat there for 4 years and going to sleep every night, not belonging there. So I know what these guys feel like, and that's, you know, that's just my personal mission, is to get all those dudes home to their families, because I know what it's like to hug my kid after missing time for a plant that's literally the most medicinally beneficial plant on earth. There's nothing else that can help you from curing a hangover to cancer. You know what I mean? Like what other one plant has that many, you know, things that can be beneficial to it? Obviously, do people misuse things? Do people? Of course, but that's their personal choice. The plant itself and giving it to people is not, there's nothing that deserves people to miss time with their families, their lives. They are the only victims of cannabis-related crime is the people who get charged and their families. That's it. And society as a whole. You got to think, you paid $350,000 for me to sit in prison for 4 years. Like, why? You know? And so now that's kind of my mission. While I was in, I wrote this book. I spent 11 months in the SHU, and this is all kind of part of my like bigger vision, which while I was in the SHU, I spent my first 7 days, it was almost in like a meditative like trance. I listened to a guy you had on, I think you released his episode maybe last week, who did ayahuasca and
ayahuasca, right?
Yeah. And now he feels like he's on like a mission, like
Drew Banky,
Yeah. And I was really feeling him on that, but mine was like different because it wasn't drug induced. It was literally like when I first went to the SHU, I didn't have a cellie because it was COVID, so they weren't me. So I was, you know, there was just an odd amount of people in the SHU, so they literally had me in there by myself for 7 days straight, nobody in there. And I had done a lot of yoga and stuff like that while I was there. So I kind of just started to meditate, and I kind of got in like a deep, like learning about myself. I call it my mountain in India, like where you're almost reach like a point where you dig inside of yourself very deeply. And I kind of found that like my purpose is to change the perception of cannabis when it comes to opiate addiction recovery. Because I believe that cannabis is actually the cure to opiate. Like if you ask somebody on the street, okay, do you want to get clean or whatever, using the AANA model, which is like complete sobriety, right? They immediately reject it. And so many people, if you're like, okay, but if you were allowed to use cannabis to wean off and like whatever, they would. But I don't understand why something that has a 10% success rate, the AA-NA model, is viewed as, like literally viewed as the only cure. Hold on a second. Oh, no, that's not him. Gotta keep it up for Edwin. It's not even 12:30. Okay, we're good. So, where was I?
You were just talking about cannabis and how, family member or your family shouldn't be at home when people are incarcerated for family, and then also your journey through the book, writing the book, and how that related to...
All right, I believe, like, for instance, when I got arrested when I was in college playing baseball with 1.25 pounds of weed. All I did was smoke weed, and I drank, but I had actually kind of naturally switched over to the whole Cali Sober thing back before Cali Sober existed, where, I smoked and my friends all drank, but I just preferred smoking. This was 21 years old. And then I got arrested for it, got kicked off the baseball team, and I immediately my lawyer's like, oh, well, you need to go to drug classes to show that you're a good person, and then do good in college and all that, and it'll kind of go away. It's just 1.25 pounds of weed. It's like $1,500 worth of mids back in the day. So I did that, but when you're that age, my friends are basically like, oh, well, they're only going to test, weed is the one that stays in your system a month. If you can do other drugs and they won't be in your system. So that's what got me started on Percocets and pills. And I also had the concept that if a doctor prescribes it, it can't be bad. And it definitely can't be worse than weed that's illegal. So the next thing I know, I'm addicted. I'm doing 3 80 milligram Oxycontins a day. I'm incredibly addicted. And then all my friends around me, because they're the ones who had, been like, oh, try this Percocet on the weekend kind of thing. So now all of us are addicted to Oxy. And, luckily I got arrested again. And they raided my house, but it was I just got lucky in a situation where I had no drugs at the time. You know what I'm saying? I had 1/4 pound of weed in my house or something like that. So it didn't turn out to be a big deal because I had, right in that moment, I was trying to get off of pills, so I didn't have any. But that got me off of pills. But I believe I would have never gotten there if weed hadn't been illegal and I hadn't gotten arrested for it. And because that's the one that with drug testing, you can't do. You can do all the other ones. You just have to stop before your drug test. But weed, you can't do. So I always felt, I just feel like that concept and the way it's implemented in America is just so set up to be only against weed, really. The whole war on drugs is they include all drugs, but weed is how they get them all. So it taking all these concepts that I have about my own personal experience, and then watching all those friends that were addicted, then becoming dependent on heroin, and then dying of fentanyl-laced overdoses. So these are my friends that I believe that if they had just been where it was just okay, weed's cool, other drugs, stay away from those, they probably would have done that. But it was that 2008, 2009, that's when pills kind of took over, and people did not understand that they were doing heroin. That's the same, that your body doesn't know the difference between the two. So then as soon as they make the pills inaccessible, heroin shoots up. Everyone switches over to heroin. And now they lace heroin with fentanyl, and that's how we end up with the epidemic, right? So all these thoughts are swirling through my mind as I'm there for 7 days thinking about the people I've lost, everything about my beliefs and everything. And I kind of came up with this plan for, I call it Olivia's Dream, where we have a farm where you have a rehab where people live, but then it's also on a cannabis farm, so that once they do 2 weeks of detoxing using cannabis, and I actually would like to include psychedelics in that, because I really am a lot of the psychedelic treatment for addiction is going really well, and I think it's a good thing for people, and kind of mix those things in on a weed farm, so as people get off of opiates, we also give them training in a field that they can take that's a new field in America, like, you know, and they can get placed into jobs, almost like a, you know, you work on the farm, whatever you're good at, or the dispensary, whatever area of the cannabis industry, like you show the interest in or you're able to perform, then we can send you out and get you jobs and stuff like that, like job placement. So that's kind of like the concept I came up with of like a recovery with that as the base of it. And then it's like, okay, well, how am I going to get the whole world to think that that's okay? Like, because most people are like, oh, that's just substituting drugs. It's like, yeah, well, so is when you go to an AA meeting and they're chugging coffee and chain smoking cigarettes outside. It's like people are going to do stuff. Like, that's just the reality. So, I mean, would you rather have your kid doing fentanyl-laced heroin or smoking weed? I think that we'd all be like smoking weed. So, anyway, all that came into like, okay, well, how do I get America to see that point, right? And so this novel is written to be a TV show, much like Prison Break is. It's not like a factual-based argument for the legalization of drugs. It's putting 6 characters in a world where drugs are legalized and then just letting them live life. So you got the DEA agent named Randolph, who's just incredibly mad that he's spent his whole life. Like, imagine what a DEA agent would feel like if all of a sudden they're like, hey, drugs are legal now. You got to go help the drug dealers get all their paperwork right so that they can sell drugs legally at the legal drugstore. Like, imagine what that would do to like a DEA agent that's just been fighting this war on drugs his whole life. So his life just starts going downhill because he's just like, this isn't the way the world's supposed to be. And then the drug kingpin that's now owning a legal store, he's sitting there like, man, this is hard. Like, it was way easier to just run the block than it is to have to file for licensing and, you know, all these things, you know what I mean? And then there's a single mom with 2 kids, like wondering like, how is this message going to affect my children? They're in high school. Like, is this going to send the wrong message to them that we've legalized drugs? And then there's another character, Sandra, that's, living on the street, selling her body for heroin. Like, she doesn't even, you know, it's just, she's completely gone. And then there's a guy in prison for weed, was kind of based off me. And then there's a young gay black cop who all he wants to do is the right thing. Like, he's you know, he sees everybody's sides and he can see how it can be a good thing, but he can also see how it could like not, you know, he just is like, wants to do the right thing, but it's confusing because it's like, everything that the police and them are taught is now kind of out the window as they transition into this new world. But it's really like all of that is just to capture the reader into a story like Prison Break. We talked about that. But it's really sending a deeper message. Kind of like, I was thinking about this earlier, like the character you said you related to, the one that the Fed guy kills in the 2nd season, maybe.
Which one?
Mahone kills the...
Oh, yeah. Tweener.
Yeah, Tweener. Yeah, Tweener. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So his character, right? Yeah. Like, think about how he went from, like, you kind of felt bad for him to being like, oh, I don't care if he dies. And then he has that, like, transformation at the end, and you feel sad that he dies. But then when you look back on it later, you're like, well, you know, he kind of deserved it, right? Like... But that's the way I see it. And I realize it's like what you have to create is like scenarios that people can grasp onto a character and see the world as they see the world. You know what I'm saying? Like that. So then when you do that and it comes into like a visual form, which Americans are like, you know, they sit there and binge watch TV shows. That's how you can get into the minds of people, like what you want them to see about like what you're trying to say. Which is that we need to re-look at the way we view drugs in America and that the war on drugs isn't working. So it's, you know, a lot of people, I think they get scared of the book because they're like, oh, I don't believe in the legalization of drugs. But it's not really about that. It's about putting 6 characters in that world and just like playing it out from there. Does that make sense? Because I firmly believe you can read this book and at the end be like, yeah, I mean, like, see, it wouldn't work. You know what I mean? Like, based on your own interpretation of what you read, it's not necessarily a call for it. It's more like okay, it happened. What happens next? Like, this is just the world that they live in. But it's, you know, it's sex, it's drugs, it's money, it's you know, it's the, like, so I'll give you a prison. So a lot of guys in prison read it, obviously. Guys I was in the shoe with, whatever. And one thing I'm definitely proud of is that, like, the super gangster black dudes love the big character who is the big gangster black drug dealer in the book. You know what I'm saying? They're like, oh, he is like, that's me. And it's, as the writer, it's like, that's exactly what I was trying to do. Because I met, like, I think you're like me. I've realized, like, listening to your podcast, you're like me in that you saw prison as a, like, wow. Because, like, me and you both don't have, like, I sold weed, you know, like, we're not, like, way crazier stories. Like, we know we're not going to win the, like, craziest story in prison, but we can actually appreciate crazy stories, like, more. Because it's like, wow, like, these people, like, you really lived like that? Like, that is crazy, you know? Like, my biggest one is a guy named Sean Gilreath. I met him in the shoe. You know, he got 5 years in the feds, was facing the death penalty in another case, and escaped from the Harold Bank Justice Center, rappelling down the thing on blanket sheets after he cut out of the rec cage on the 7th floor with hacksaw blades his mom had sent in the mail that he slept with up his butt. Like, dead at, like, I'm like, oh my God. So he's like telling me that, I'm like, I'm never gonna win a story contest. Like, that's the craziest thing.
Some of these stories people always write like that they don't believe it, but you really, it's, you know, it's crazy. But people,
I read his, like, I wouldn't have believed it if he hadn't sent me all his paperwork, and I'm reading the case and I'm like, oh my God, like, that is crazy.
It's
like, this,
better than TV or the movies.
Well, I'm thinking, I'm like, and then I realized, like, oh, because most people never meet these people. Like, this guy is going to be in prison forever. Like, so whoever actually meets him, you know what I mean? Like, once he disappeared from society after he got caught, like, no one else, you know, he's just gone to the rest of society, but he's really not. He's sitting there, and I found him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was the first time I took, like, I wrote, it was like a long, like maybe like 50 pages or something, like his story, because I wanted to capture it all, because I'm like, I'm going to find somebody that's going to make this story into a movie one day. You know what I mean? Like, because I kind of, as like a writer and like a story, you know, I grasp onto stories, and I grasp onto people as characters. Like, when I see, like, you know, as a character, Travis Cullen. Travis Cullen is a book character for sure. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just his personality, his way, like, you can just see the way he thinks. You know how he's going to, like, respond if he's put in such certain scenarios, which is really what, like, writing is. So it was just, like, I guess the book was just a culmination of, like, my beliefs mixed in with, like, putting it into a story, giving, like, odes or, like, to people that I know or people experiences that I've had. It's like a lot of the characters are kind of like a mixture of people I know and things like that. So it was just like, and to have that journey while you're spending 11 months in the shoe, you know, to accomplish, like, it's just like, for me, it was like I would never, most people, you said, okay, I'm going to stick you in a 6x9 cell for 11 months straight with another person with a toilet, a sink, a bunk bed, and a desk. Like, I think most people would be like, I'd never survive. But it's like, instead, I did the greatest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, you use it as a tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And we'll have the link to your book in the bio. Mm-hmm. And before we jump in, you know, to your story, dude, you got to try one of these. These are the Magic Mind matcha energy shots.
All right.
It's got a little quirky taste to it, but it's good, you know?
Yeah.
Give it a little shake. These things, I keep them in the fridge here for our guests. And it improves your mental performance, a sharper mind, lower stress, better energy. You take one of these. This is going to be like my second one today, okay. And it just, you're fired up, you know, right. and it helps you get through long episodes, sit and you just focus more.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers, man. Try that out. What do you think?
It's good.
Yeah, not bad, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have like a, I don't know, it doesn't taste like vegetables or, I don't know, it's just good.
Yeah, and there's a ton of people into matcha that's matcha flavored, mm-hmm. So they definitely got to check that out, and you get a pretty big discount with our promo code. I'll have that in the link of the bio for people too.
That's awesome.
So where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland.
Baltimore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Elk Ridge, like outside of Baltimore, yeah.
Mom, dad, siblings?
Mom and dad still together, super right-wing, like religious people. I grew up homeschooled, won a national Bible quiz.
This is the first.
Yeah, right.
You guys grew up religious.
What a twist right there, huh?
You guys grew up religious?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Church. Sunday school, Sunday morning, then all day Sunday we'd have Bible quiz practice, then we had church choir, then we had Sunday night service, then we had Wednesday night prayer meeting, then we had Friday night Awana, which is like youth group. So what's that, seven different services a week?
You did this all through high school too?
Oh my gosh, all the way from the time I was born until I was 18.
So you've never experienced like public high school?
No.
Do you miss that? Like, do you envy that or what?
I'm one of those people who just like doesn't waste a whole lot of time thinking about that kind of thing. There was probably time. I was lucky enough that like there was a lot of kids that went to my church that were in a lot more of like a like I would consider it more like a cult, to be completely honest with you. But they were a lot more like I was allowed to play sports with everybody. In fact, when I was 18, like I was like in love with a girl in the church, and her dad said that I couldn't like court her because I played baseball on Sundays, and like you're supposed to like rest on Sundays. So because I played baseball on Sundays, I wasn't good enough for his daughter. So that's the kind of like church I grew up in. But like I said, because I was good at sports, my mom let me do a little bit more, and I was around. So it was like looking back, it's like the kids on the team always felt bad for me. You know what I mean? Like, and like now looking back, it's like I pick up on that because it was like, why? Like, I feel like they act a little weird around me. You know what I mean? But like looking back, it's because they were worried about like, I don't know if we can say anything around Jeremy. Like, what if he tells his mom? Like that kind of thing. So I made a big point to like, and so when I did RDAP, and it's something that I've like, processed already kind of, but what like a lot of in RDAP, they try to like dig down to like, whatever. And it's like, I realized that I've always since my mom, everybody had to not be themselves around my mom because it was like, you can't cuss around. You can't do anything that you got to be secretive around this. I've always been like, I want everyone to be like, they can be cool. Like they can do anything around me and it's cool. Like everything's fine. Like I'm the cool one. I'm down. Like you can do anything around me. I'm not going to tell, all that kind of stuff. And probably to the point of like detriment to my life, like where it's like, I probably should have like been like, okay guys, like we should probably chill on this. But I just was always like, oh no, I'm the cool one. I'm cool. So that's how I grew up, was definitely in that. And then in fact, the first time I smoked weed, I was going through a lot. I went to so I homeschooled my whole life, but then I go off to college to play baseball. So it was the first time I'm going to class and like all these things. And it was like a very, very hard adjustment for me. And I was going through a lot of mentally and all this stuff, kind of had like a breakdown during the season, all that kind of things. And then my friends were basically like, well, we haven't like told you this, but like we started smoking weed and that would probably help. And so they were afraid that I was going to be like, no, I don't, and I was like, okay. And so I tried it. And like literally like the next day I hit a home run, my first at bat. And it's like, what it really is that it's just like, I needed to realize that it was all going to be all right and just relax. It was just, I'm a person that gets too anxious, like if, I don't chill out. And so smoking just helps me as an individual. And that's why I'm big on like, really, it's crazy to me that we consider ourselves a free country, but it's like you don't have the personal freedom to decide what is or isn't good for you, your personality, how you feel, like, you know what I mean? So I think that that's a good thing with the legalization is basically it's like if you're using it medicinally, AKA to feel better, like people have kind of accepted that as a majority of society. Anyway, so that was kind of where I started smoking weed, was like those college years where I was like really experiencing a lot of anxiety and all those kind of things. And it made better. And then, like I said, though, then it led to me getting arrested and then, all those things. So a lot of people are like, oh, like, look how weed's ruined your life. I'm like, I mean, really, it's like weed being illegal ruined my life. And I can understand like you did the time, did the crime, but like I'm always like I did 4 years in prison. Like you can't act like I didn't. I served my time. I'm still allowed to say what I think and feel. You know what I mean? 'Cause a lot of people have this like mentality that they think I should be like apologetic or I should be like remorse. I'm like, about what? That I sold, like I was literally, what I really was like I was the bartender downtown, and then like my friend moved to California, started a dispensary. He's like, yo, if I send you a pound of weed, do you think you could get rid of it? And I'm like, I mean, probably. Everybody I know smokes weed. So he sent me a pound, and the next day it's gone because everyone's like, oh, wow, this is really good, blah, 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 blah. And that's just that. So that started that. And then, and then one time my friend came over to smoke, and me and my daughter's mom, I was with her at the time. And, we went in, and I was like, oh, yeah, we just bought this bed. And it was like a king-size bed we'd just gotten from Mattress Firm or something. And he's like, oh, it's a nice bed. I was like, yeah, imagine how much weed you could put in that bed. And he's like, oh, I actually, I know one of my friends, my college roommate, runs a foam factory in Florida. He could totally make you mattresses that could do that. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, you can tell him what it's for and everything. He'll design it exactly for it. I was like, okay. So that's what I started doing. Like I had the guy in Florida ship the mattress to California. I'd go out there, we'd buy 40 pounds, put it in a mattress, and ship it across the country. Like that's what we were doing. And I had a guy that was paying me, like giving me the money for the weed. I'd go out and buy the weed, put it in the mattress, send it back, and then when he got the mattress with the 40 pounds, I'd get $200 a pound on top. So I was just like, sweet.
So what's the breakdown? How much?
So
are you
that would
paying
be like
for
$8,000.
That you're making profit.
Yeah, I would make $8,000 off of like basically being the person that like went out there, bought like, you know, made sure it all got, you know, packaged and everything in the mattress, sent it back. Because it would be sent to a storage unit that was in like somebody else's name or what. Like I didn't have anything to do with that. He would take care of that. So it was just like fly out there. Now, I tell people all the time, I'm like, and I own a moving company now. I also, even when I was selling weed, like I said, I was bartending downtown. I was working in a moving company, and I'm selling weed. I've just always been that kind of person. Like it's like if I'm not working, it's like I feel lazy. I'm not gonna, you know, whatever. So I tell people all the time though, I'm like, yo, everyone acts like selling weed is like, oh, he's lazy, he just sells weed. I'm like, selling weed, like standing at a bar and getting drunk, talking to hot women is way easier than flying out to California, getting stuck in LA traffic, showing up to buy 5 pounds from somebody, and then the weed sucks, and then realizing that you got to drive 2 hours this direction to maybe find out that weed sucks too, and then you have to have it all done before the terminal closes at 5 o'clock on Wednesday. You know what I mean? Like it's like, and you're, you know, trafficking a felony. Like, you know what I mean? Like the stress of all of those things, like, oh my God, like it's so much easier to just own a moving company. Like to everybody that listens to this that is still selling drugs, and this is what I told people in prison all the time, for real. If you are out there selling drugs right now and you view yourself as highly successful, if you are making tons of money, you are capable of running a legitimate business and not risking going to prison. And even if you screw that business up, going bankrupt is a lot easier than going and serving 10 to 20 years. And the kind of money you're talking about, I promise you, is like just start a legal business, try it out. If it doesn't work, try something else, because drug dealing is not it in America. It is not the wise decision.
Now, the mattress doesn't smell at all when you're putting it in there? And
no,
how do you reseal it?
What we would do is that was always the biggest problem, right? Is that 11-inch vacuum seal bags in California are so hard to find. I'm talking about every CVS, Walmart, and Target anywhere within an hour and a half of Los Angeles I have been to 10 times at least, because you need the 11-inch vacuum seal bags, and then you like each package would fit 5 pounds in it. So we'd cut them into threes. So you put 5 pounds in, vacuum seal, rubbing alcohol all over it, another vacuum seal bag over top of it, rub alcohol over that, another vacuum seal bag over that. So it's like triple sealed with the 2 layers of alcohol in between because dogs can't smell through the rubbing alcohol. That's how we did it. And that's how we did it even when, like, before that, he was just sending me pounds and 5 pounds in the mail and stuff like that. And that's all done with that. It's all vacuum sealed.
Do you have a custom mattress, or you cut open a new one every time?
No.
Or?
So the guy, like, basically what he was doing was sending like one piece of foam that was the top, and then the rest of it was all put together, so that like the bags would be 5 pounds, like 4 of those, and then it kind of had a foam thing in the middle to put stability to it, and then 4 5-pound bags underneath, and that's how you would get the 40 pounds in there. So the bags of weed were probably about that tall. Like as like if a queen size bed is sideways, that's how tall the bags of weed were, and then there was 8 of them.
Now, was this after college or during college?
Oh no, this was 2013. Well, 2015 is when we were doing the mattresses. Like 2014 is when I kind of like built up to that level of selling weed, I guess.
So did you graduate college successfully or no?
No. Okay. After that year where I got arrested and kicked off the baseball team, I mean, like, if I'm honest with you, I only went to college to play baseball. Like, it was, once I got kicked off the college baseball team, then the only reason I really stayed in college was because the lawyer had told me if I don't get good grades, then I'm going to go to jail. So I got like a 3.75 that semester. I looked real good when I showed up to court. 3.75, all these drug classes. Meanwhile, I'm really addicted to pills now. But on paper, I look good. And I think that's kind of like the thing that always like gets me is that like they always look at like what you are on paper, and it's like they don't really know the whole story behind like what it is on paper. You know what I mean?
How did your parents react of getting kicked out of school and even caught with drugs? Because I imagine it was a very drug-free household growing up.
Even to like me and my mom, like I love my mom. I just visited my parents on the way up here. I would say that, there's an understanding between the two of us that we just don't talk about those things. Like it's just, but they've been there for me throughout all of it. It's never been like a turn their back on me because of it or anything like that. They supported me my whole bit. I wrote letters to my mom the whole time I was in the SHU, and my sister, like, the way most people are with their mom is how I am with my sister. Like, she's always kind of like taking care of me when it comes to me, me being just an irresponsible like human being. And she's more the person that if in the moment I'm going to call my sister, my mom's going to find out, but my sister's going to be there to like bail me out of jail or whatever it is. That's why I moved to South Carolina from Baltimore, was because my sister lived down there. So her and I are like super close, like super open and honest. With my mom, it's more like we're only going to discuss certain topics.
So now fast forward to where you get to the mattress business. Yeah. Are you like a low-level dealer too, or are you just doing the big loads? Or are you actually breaking it down and...
I mean, honestly, so the way the mattress ended up being was it ended up basically being its own separate thing. To, I was getting maybe like 5 pounds a week or something like that I had, a guy I'd give a pound to, another guy I'd give 2, like very much only my like people that were in my inner circle of like they walk in my door without knocking kind of people were the only people that bought like weed from me, like anything less than probably a quarter pound, you know what I mean? Like, and normally for them, it's just, I would just give them some weed. It's like, oh, you need some weed, bro? Here you go. But that was kind of the level I was at, which I always try to do numbers for people. I mean, you're talking about, if you're making 700 a pound, breaking it down at all, like that's really good. And I was averaging maybe like 4 on those. So you're talking about, if I'm doing 5 pounds, like maybe $2,000 a week,
which is great money.
It is, but you can make $2,000 a month legally.
Oh,
You get what I'm
$2,000 a
saying?
week. You could drive Uber and
Yeah,
and
exactly.
make
That's what I'm
$2,000,
saying.
yeah.
Like back to that is like that sounds good. It is like, oh yeah, 2,000. Like yeah, hell yeah, $2,000 a week is good money. You can pay all your bills. You can have a little fun. Like $2,000 a week is great, right? But it's not risk. It's not worth 4 years in prison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's like, and even with something like that, where it's like people look at that as a baby bit, and I look at it as a baby bit too, because I certainly know that people do a lot more time than that. But it's not worth it. Like it's just there. If you're smart enough to like be able to handle the stress and the like everything that can go wrong, like you're talking about a world where there's no option of like calling the cops to like figure it out. There's no going to court, so it's just a risk. Now that's one of the reasons I stayed with weed, and I was only dealing like it's like. People look at it from the outside. They're like, oh, if you were doing all that, like that much weed, because like when you read my case or whatever, it's like, oh, like he was doing, but it's like, okay, but I was dealing with my one boy who's getting 40 pounds at a time. So that adds up real quick. But these are like my friends that I hang out with on a daily basis. You know what I mean? Like they're not, they're my boys. And then, the people that I'm even like selling, like these are like all people, like I'm not like, I guess people always have this concept of like the block mentality where like people are just rolling by and rolling down their windows like, yo, you got anything? You know what I mean? Like that's not really the way weed dealing is. Like when you just sell weed, it's way more of like you guys all hung out and smoked weed together for years. Now he lives out west and has weed and you're, bartending there. He's like, oh, like that the situation that happened with me is more, I feel like more typical of how people are like selling weed these days, because and that's one of the things, that's one of the concepts that I take into the concept of legalizing drugs, is that when we were younger, or when I was younger, you're way younger than I am, but the early 2000s, like drugs were getting brought by the cartel, like, or weed was getting, it was all Mexican brick weed. You're talking about cartels, you're talking about cartel violence, you're talking about, what they do when things, whatever, right? But when legalization happened in California and Colorado especially, I would say that 2012 when they legalized is really what got the ball like really rolling. But essentially, weed kind of transitioned into an American industry. Like Americans were growing weed in America and shipping weed across the country. Like no one was getting, weed from Mexico. Like no one gets weed from Mexico anymore. It literally killed the entire industry of cartels moving marijuana to America with just legalizing it. Once we legalized it, it'd be, because even what I was doing, you got to think that's still an American product. Like they're getting it out there. Like a lot of times I would go out there, walk into a dispensary and buy a bunch of pounds of weed. Like, it's a dispensary. So I'm buying it at a store and then it becomes illegal when I put it in a mattress and ship it across the country. But in like a grander scale, it's still an American product. Like that money is being spent in America. It's being transition in America. It's all staying in America rather than going to cartels just by legalizing it. So on an economics thing, it's like, well, if you legalized all drugs and all the money was now being regulated and taxed, and we focused on treating addiction and the root causes of that rather than incarceration and all those kind of things, that's kind of where like I put all those things together. But that's all from me shipping weed and like that. I mean, it's just like there was never guns. Like if people are always like, oh, there had to be guns. I'm like, why would any of these people have brought guns? Like we were hanging out playing video games. Like, and it's not even like I'm really even selling them weed where they're bringing me money and I'm handing them a pound. I'm just handing them the pound of weed and then they bring me the money back later. So how are they going to robbing me is just not showing back up. Like,
I mean, I think it depends on who you're associating with. Because I've talked to guys in your position where they needed weapons because they were dealing with shady individuals.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Is that it's like the weed game. It can be like that.
It can be if you're dealing with cartel and dangerous people and gangs.
Exactly.
But if you're selling to your boys or you guys are a bunch of, hippies kind of, or stoners, then it's chill.
And that's kind of like, there's a big difference to me between guys who were just like a drug dealer, like where it's like, you're just like, they and being in prison with them, they see themselves as that, like, they like, nah, like, I like, F that. I sell drugs. This is what I do. I don't care if it's weed, crack, like whatever. It doesn't matter. Boom. Like whatever's in the bed. But that's just not my mentality. Like that's not my mentality. It's like, you know, and it's not, and like I said, some people that sell weed, like they are like that for sure, of course, because there is money in weed. But there is this whole other section of cannabis dealings in America now that's like you said, it's like a bunch of hippies, they're boys, they smoked weed together growing up, they love it, you know, they move some, like, you know, almost everybody I know has some friend from high school that moved out west and started getting into the weed industry. It's just, it's more like an acceptable part of life. So then, you know, it just, and it's money. So then, you know, money gets involved. Like, you know, exactly what happened is like my friend moved out there. You know, he needs money because he's trying to get weed, you know, get his thing going on out there. I'm living in South Carolina. All my friends want weed. You know, boom. Oh, there we go. I never, like, I really thought, like, I didn't think 6 months. I thought 6 months. Like, okay, you know, if I get caught doing this, it's like, what? It can't be more than 6 months. You're not going to spend more than 6 months in prison for weed. And at this point, 2016 was when I got arrested by the state. I was like, there's no way. Like, no one cares. My lawyer's like, yeah, if you don't talk, it's going to be 5 years. I'm like, 5. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Yeah. So tell us how you got caught and how it became a Fed case.
So,
and how long were you doing it before, for up until you got caught?
According to the feds, well, it was like December of 2013 is when, you know, he started sending me weed. And then June of 2016 is when I got arrested by the state.
How many pounds do you think you moved in between that time?
I honestly have no idea.
Are we talking hundreds, thousands?
Not thousands. Okay. Not hundreds. I mean, if I had to put a number on it, I don't know, probably 700 or 800 pounds maybe in the course of 2 years, maybe.
And how much money do you think that is?
I mean, at 200, I would guesstimate that I made between $200,000 and $250,000 in 2 years.
In 2 years, so that's $125,000 a year, no taxes, because it's all cash.
Yeah. Which, like I said, like that's obviously, I'm not saying it's not good money.
Girls are making more than that on OnlyFans.
Exactly.
They make that a month.
Exactly.
No
like,
prison time.
No prison time. No prison time. That's what I mean. It's like, you know, like it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. And, you know, I think that it really was never about the money to me. Like, I know that everyone says that, but it's just like, I really love weed. Like, and I really loved, like, and even now what's awesome about having the novel and about fighting for cannabis prisoners is that I'm back in the space without having to risk any more of my freedom. So it's like, and almost like going to prison for it has kind of given me this like mission. And now it's like, put me in, like going to the Last Prisoner Project Gala tonight, like meeting Travis, like in the video that we made down in DC, like doing all these things have kind of like helped heal the fact that I went to prison for it. But also like it's put me to where I can get involved without having to risk more time with my family and stuff like that.
There's also like the art of the hustle and the art of the deal. Those, you know, that psychology of you enjoy putting it together. Like for me, I loved events. It wasn't necessarily about the money. I mean, money is great and stuff. But
exactly. But you like being the man and and that's, so now I own a moving company and that's, you know, I own a moving company. I own a Rivalry Moving in Charleston, South Carolina. And because I've been in the industry, you know, a long time, I was really good at moving. I'm like a really, really hard worker. I just am. And now that I own my own moving company, it's like a lot of the same skills that and kind of like really it's logistics. Like thinking of like when I came up with the logistics of getting that mattress across the country, like everything involved with that. You're talking about I'd get to California, I'd go to the store, I'd buy a prepaid phone. Well, first thing I'd do is put cash on a like a prepaid card so that the card would be untraceable. Then I'd buy a phone with that card so that if they looked into it, the phone got bought with that card. Then I would put a whole name into the phone that was somebody I went to church with growing up. It was always somebody I went to church with growing up. And I'd make a whole fake profile with them, like as, you know, a Gmail, like all these things, so that then when I get on freightcenter.com and I'd like, you know, go through the whole, because to get the mattress, they wanted to come pick up the mattress from you, but if you call them, then you can actually deliver the mattress to an 18-wheeler terminal, and then it goes. But you have to call them and kind of like explain the situation. So I would call and like pretend to be this, and I would always have to pick a different 18-wheeler company. I'd have to, just like all these things. So it's all, and like you said, like those like figuring out the logistics of all of these things was like almost like invigorating, because it's like I'm figuring out like how to ship, $100,000 worth of weed across the country. This is kind of cool. Well, now it's like I'm just thinking of like how I'm going to get this U-Haul and this U-Haul picked up from these locations with a truck trip. You know what I mean? It's like the same, I'm doing the same thing.
It's fun.
And yeah, exactly. And then but then I get paid at the end, and I'm like, I almost feel like that's like, when I make money at the movie company, I'm like, okay, I'm allowed to do that. Okay, I'm allowed to do that. Like I'm allowed to make money legally. It's okay. Like, because it's like I'm so used to like, it's like as soon as my life is going good, it's like, oh God, I'm getting arrested.
So bring us to that arrest, or how you got caught with the mattress smuggling.
Okay, so the basically, we were going through the Charlotte airport, and I had 40,000 in my bag, and another guy had 42,000. Well, first the mattress went missing. So that was done. So we got a guy that was supposed to drive. So he was coming out with me. He had 40,000 in his bag. I had 42,500 in my bag, something like that. And I went through no problem, like I always did. And he goes through, they stop him, they see the money, they let him through. Then they come over to the Starbucks line at the Charlotte airport, and they ask to talk to him. He goes over, then they call me over, and basically they're like, we're going to take this $40,000 from you until you can prove like how you have it. So I had like the guy whose money it was, I told him, I was like, they took the money, I don't know how to get it back. So he goes after it, because we had a plausible story of why we had the money, right? But we also know the truth. So it's like, so basically, essentially, he got a lawyer and he got the money back. Like, we had to go up there and meet with Homeland Security, like all that shit, like sit there, interview with them, and they gave the money back. But they never believed it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like they had to give us the money back because we kind of had enough evidence that said that they had to. But that's when the feds started investigating us and trying to figure out, like, okay, where did this $40,000 really come from?
They were like catch and release to see.
Yes.
How do you get 40,000 through TSA though? You said you made it through with your portion.
I don't really like. It's not like I really know for sure. I just never had a problem with it when I was flying. Now, I've gotten fat now, but I used to be in shape. And like I said, I was a baseball player. So what I used to do was I would dress, like I would wear like an Orioles hat with like an Orioles Under Armour like thing. And I'd have like my glove in my bag and like wear like, and one time in Atlanta, they found the money. Like they found the money and the lady looked at me and I was like, yeah, I got spring training out there, whatever. And she was like, oh, okay. And like, let me go. So I never said I'm a baseball player, but I tried to like look like I was a professional baseball player so that they would just be like, oh, okay. Like it makes, and I guess, I mean, honestly, like playing the white card, you know what I mean? Like I'm like at the time, I'm like a 27-year-old, in shape, white guy, dressed like he's an athlete, like with like sports stuff in a bag and money. Like they just never, like that was just how I did it.
So the money's just casually in the bag?
Yeah.
And you put it through, you always carry it with you, you don't check it in?
Mm-mm. I would carry it right with me. And I'd act like when she stopped, I'm like, what, you're not allowed to have money? She's like, oh, no, you are. I'm like, all right, well.
Yeah, because I was reading the other day, there's not, which I thought this was untrue from a movie or something, but I thought that there was a certain dollar amount you could travel with, but there's not. It says you can bring a limited amount of money through TSA, but they could stop you and ask for
proof of how you have it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happened. And like I said, we had enough proof to get the money back. But it was like, I just, and even when I was sitting there talking to him, like afterwards, he's like, oh, they're going to give us the money back. And I'm just like, bro, because I stopped selling weed. I stopped, like that made me stop. I stopped. And then I got a job, I was bartending again, working in a moving company, and then I broke my hand playing flag football. And so you can't bartend or move with a broken hand. And so like like after a little while, they're like, oh, well, like basically it's like, I needed money. So I started selling weed again. And then, so the money, all that happened in like August of 2015. And then June of 2016 is when the state raided my house. And then, March of 2017, the feds picked up the case and came into my house and picked me up, even though from the time I got arrested by the state until I got arrested by the feds, I didn't do anything illegal. Like I was just working at a moving company doing nothing. They knew that, like all that. What it really was is because they like literally I refused to speak with them at all. Like my lawyer kept being like, oh, it's like I don't have anything to say to them. So they tried to like basically arrest me so that like as punishment, because my lawyer, we knew that they were going to indict me, and it was supposed to be like a, hey, turn yourself in situation. Like that was the way it had been kind of planned out. But for some reason, they just instead decided to come in at 5:30 in the morning, guns up, FBI, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yo, what? Like for real? You guys couldn't have just told me like come in, I'd come in. You know I'd come in. But
and where'd they go? To your apartment? You have a house? You had a house, and it was just you at the time?
It was me. My daughter was in bed with me. My 18-month-old daughter was asleep in bed with me with like the guns up and all that. That's one of my biggest, like that's why I always see it as they're up 1-0 to me, but I will never let them, I will not lose this battle. After putting a gun, like I said, like my entire time selling weed, never once was a gun involved. Like there was never a whisper of a gun. I never felt in danger of a gun. There was no weapons involved. Nobody cared about, like, I mean, some people I'm sure had guns and I'm sure they dealt with like whatever, but nothing in my dealings with anyone was a gun ever even a thought. So you know what I'm saying?
I'm confused. What did they actually have on you? Like, what was it?
So they only had 7 pounds in my house when I got arrested, but what they had was bank records.
That's how they were able to get the warrant for your arrest?
So basically, my people in California had been having, because I would take money out, like the cash going out wasn't the only way I would, like, there's too much money involved. Like you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, like that I'm being fronted and owing back and all that stuff. So essentially what we were doing is dropping $9,000 in bank accounts at a time, but that couldn't equal enough as much as we needed. So I'd have to take the rest. So we're trying to get as much in as we can, 9,000 at a time. But I live in Greenville, South Carolina. It's a tiny town. There's only one Wells Fargo open on Saturdays, and it's only open till 1 p.m. I probably walked in that thing at like 5-6 times at 12:58 on a Saturday, dropping $9,000 exactly into a bank account in California. I'm like, yo, guys, like, you've got to come up with a better way to do this. This is sketchy. They're like, no, they don't care. They don't care. I'm like, they're like, it has to be 10,000. I'm like, man, this is sketchy, bro. Like, no one else is doing this. No one else is showing up with $9,000 2 minutes before the bank closes every weekend. That's crazy. And because you got to think they're out in Cali, so they're still waking up on a Saturday at like 10 in the morning. You know what I mean? So they might get up at like 9:15 and finally give me but the thing is they're giving me different bank account numbers and different business names that I'm putting these things in. Little did I know, all of those businesses all led back to one dude. So he ends up on my indictment. I've never even met the dude. I have no idea who this guy is other than just like, I've seen his name on like bank account, like I've dropped money into a bank account with his name on it, but I didn't realize that all of the bank accounts I had dropped into all went back to him. Mm-hmm. So they had me dropping like $780,000 over the course of 2 years into his bank accounts, which was really their evidence. So basically so he ended up having to forfeit $500,000 cash and a $280,000 property in LA, and he got just structuring charge. Like he didn't go to jail.
Why didn't he go to prison? Did he snitch on someone?
I'm the only person in my case who went to jail.
Yeah,
he didn't go to jail. And the guy who was the one giving me all the money, who had moved out to California and was involved in all of it, he just told on everybody and got no time. So I'm the only person there was 3 people in my indictment. I was at the bottom. I'm the only one who got time. I got 5 years.
Did they offer you to snitch on anyone? Or was it too late?
Yeah, actually, my lawyer called me because I told him I wasn't going to talk. But then he called me and he was like, "Look, they just arrested the co-defendant in California, he's saying that they have the wrong guy. If you'll just identify that is the person, like they're willing to work with you. I was like, I've never seen him before in my life. And my lawyer's like, okay, but it doesn't matter. Like if you just like help them. Like, and I was like, what do you not understand about? I've never seen this dude in my life. I'm not identifying like. You know, I'm realizing like, oh, so this is how you guys really do this shit. It's like you're telling me what to say to get myself out of it when I've literally never met the dude. I've never met the dude in my life. Like because essentially what it is like they being the feds. Because like even when I got sentenced, which surprised me, the prosecutor, she was she was like, you know, Mr. Grove has like no violence, like, you know, he doesn't seem like a bad guy, but basically like because he didn't cooperate, like he is like, you know, he's due the mandatory minimum 60-month sentence. And the judge, because I had people there, like, you know, my boss, like all these people to sit there and try to help. And the judge was basically like, look, I'm going to give you the mandatory minimum. I'm not giving you a day over the mandatory minimum. So you can have all these people come up and say, but I'm tied. Like I have to give you, because without the downward departure from telling, it is what it is. You're going to do the mandatory minimum. That's all there is to it. So, I mean, it's just something I had to accept. That's what's going to happen. That's what I did.
Now, here, let me give you a hypothetical. We talk about these weed cases, how it's not right that they're getting so many years in prison for weed. And in your case, on the other end of it, right, devil's advocate, what if they were charged with tax evasion?
I mean, I do have money laundering too, which that's just, but that's more like, it's not a money laundering. Some money laundering means you can't get a bank account when you get out and all those kind of things. It's just the basic like drug, like basically anytime you sell drugs, like you're money laundering because you're certainly not reporting it as taxes. My argument with that is like, you got to give us a chance.
So you're saying you would pay taxes if it was legal?
Yeah, absolutely,
okay.
absolutely.
But
I believe that one day I will get involved in that industry again when it is like when I'm, you know, free and clear of everything and all that kind of stuff. But I would never do it. Like I said, like now I know how to run a business, like a legal one, like that. It's not. Yeah, it's more paperwork. It's more like annoying in that kind of way. It's not as like, I guess like. It doesn't sound as cool, you know what I mean? Like, oh, a drug dealer, whatever. But it's not like, it's just easier to just follow the rules and do it that way. And I think that like in states, like for instance, California right now, the regulations are like way, 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 way more than they used to be. It used to be just the wild, wild west out there. You could basically like have a piece of paper that says, oh, I'm growing plants for all these people, and they wouldn't cut them down. Now, like a lot of people in my space are not going to agree with me saying this, but it makes sense to me that the give and take is that like out there, when you get caught and you don't have all your licenses, they cut all your weed down, which means you're going to take a huge financial loss. And then they're going to hit you with a huge fine that's going to be basically unpayable. And like financially, that is a huge, like that's a huge thing. Like that is a huge punishment, right? Like that is like, in my mind, that's punishment enough. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like there is punishments for that don't involve going to prison. Like those kind of things, like if you don't give people the chance to do it legally, then you don't have an argument in my mind. Like if I didn't have the chance to pay taxes on the weed that I was selling, then you can't be like, oh, well, you didn't pay the taxes on the weed you were selling. You got to give me a chance to do that. You can't say I didn't do it when you didn't give me a chance to do it. You get what I'm saying? So, but with that, I think that once people are given the chance to do it legally, and then they're choosing to still do it illegally, then the punishments that come along with that, having your plants cut down, having, you know, financial crippling, like literally crippling financial penalties where you're never gonna be able to really be in the cannabis industry again, that comes with the territory of legalization. You know, you got to do it right.
Couldn't these people make the same argument for like cocaine or anything? Like people being born into weed being illegal, they already know that that's illegal to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's no different than like cocaine. I'm just saying from like the government's perspective on
Well,
it.
I mean, obviously, I think that cocaine should be legalized and regulated.
Okay, well, you know what
Yeah.
I mean. Like I'm saying, like that individuals kind of know it's illegal to begin with. So it's more the bigger picture is if you want it to be, if you want the opportunity to have it taxed or whatnot, or to pay your taxes, then you wouldn't do it to begin with, just so you could.
Like you're doing it because you don't have to pay taxes?
That, and also like there's a different way maybe to go about it during that time period than actually sell it because you know it's illegal, if that makes sense.
Okay. I mean, I get what you're like.
Like people are arguing that there shouldn't be, say, 40 years for going to prison
Yes.
for weed.
Yeah.
But they knew selling the weed that it was illegal to begin with.
Yes.
But then there's the other argument, well, weed never should have been illegal to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that gray area of, well, the person knew it was illegal, so they shouldn't have started to sell it to begin with. And they should have fought the opportunity to be able to sell it in a different way.
So, like I said, I did 4 years. So I served my time. Like no one can say I didn't. I did. So I feel like I am able to speak on this in the sense of this. On an individual, like we're talking micro, macro, right? Micro, you're absolutely right. It was my decision to do something illegal that led to me going and spending 4 years in prison. I did it, right? On a micro scale, everyone who makes the decision to sell drugs, sell weed, whatever, is making the decision and risking that, right? But if we only focus as a society on each individual choice and not the macro real issue, we know that people are going to keep making the same choice, right? Like on a statistical sense, like you can say all day, oh, each individual, but we know the law and supply and demand exist. So someone is going to sell the drugs. One of my biggest arguments with like the novel and everything is when I was in prison, all these guys that big drug dealer, like, oh yeah, like felt like they deserved to be there for life because they were such a big gangster drug dealer, right? When I asked them, okay, well, how many people stopped doing drugs because you got arrested and are in jail now? None. Like, right? And so on a macro scale, we're talking about supply and demand of drugs to users. The users are going to be there. That means someone's going to supply. Now, I had the choice whether to be that supplier. You have the choice whether to be that supplier. You know, my wife has a choice to be the supplier or not. But in the end, someone is going to choose they are going to be the supplier. Like, someone will make that choice. That's impossible that it's not, like, that's a fact. So on a macro scale, we know someone's going to make that choice. So you can be the kind of person that's like, oh, well, each individual, that's their fault, which it is. But on a macro scale, we have to look at like, okay, but we know that's going to happen. We know there's going to be someone that sells the drugs. We know that people are going to. So what can we do about this that's going to take that choice away from those people? Like, and that's where regulation and stuff comes in, just like, you know, alcohol. We had moonshine. It was people getting killed, all that. You made it legal. You regulated it. Now most people, what? They go to the store to buy it. Alcohol is the worst drug on earth. It really is.
I didn't think about alcohol. That's a fair point with the moonshine and everything back in the day before it was legal.
Yeah. So when they made it illegal, it caused so many problems that they made it legal again because they realized, oh, you know what? And back then, that's literally the reason that happened was because then Harry Anslinger, since he lost going after alcohol, he had to find something to go after. He was a super racist, so he went after weed. Like, his quotes are right there. Like, you know, they're right there on the internet. You can see what he said about it. But he was saving his agency because they took alcohol away from him. So the only thing that enough people in America did that he could go after drug-wise was marijuana. But going back to the alcohol, you got to think, like, you know, I bartended. I sold weed. It's not even close. You own a club. Probably, would you say that things that happened at your club is what put like any kind of spotlight on you, like events?
Well, so the club never had anything to do with why I went to prison, but there were situations that brought more heat to me, like selling liquor without a permit, or kids would just come drunk or on drugs. But it was never weed. Weed makes
well,
people
no, I'm not talking about weed.
Okay.
I'm talking about Alcohol. I'm talking about.
Alcohol
I'm talking
makes
about,
you brutally. I've seen the worst. And
Exactly.
I've been very drunk. I'd rather. And I used to be very anti-weed, and now I love doing the Tyson edibles. I'll do those every night, and they help me sleep. But you're like raised by your teachers and stuff to weed is bad.
Yes.
This and that.
Yes.
But alcohol, I feel worse on alcohol.
Oh my gosh.
Unless I take like a lot of milligrams of weed, then I'll be a little like weed hungover the next day.
Yeah.
But alcohol, I can't function. I can't do anything.
And you got to think like a lot of the arguments they're using for all, there's a book called Chasing the Scream by Johan Hari. Amazing book on. It's more like a statistical, like story-based argument of legalizing drugs, like how the war on drugs started and all that. But in the book, it talks about like, basically they have a scale where drugs are assigned a score of how bad they are. And alcohol's like a 72 and meth is like a 45. And you think of like meth and heroin as terrible, and they can be, but like, for instance, like meth, the real problem with meth is long-term staying, like if you stay awake for 7 days, it doesn't matter whether you did meth or whatever it is that made you stay awake for 7 days, you're going to be crazy. Like staying awake, like it's really the like being awake for that long. And I'm not telling people to go do meth at all. What I'm saying is that alcohol within a matter of minutes, you can commit a heinous crime and have no idea you did it. You know what I mean? Like you're talking about people kill their wives, don't remember because they were drunk and, in a blackout, beat her to death. They don't remember. Like literally they're going to spend the rest of their life in prison for something they didn't remember. And as a society, we just accept it. We're like, oh, well, alcohol is legal. Why? Because Jesus turned water into wine. Like, why is that the one that we just accept as a society? So when you take what we accept as a society as alcohol and then compare it to other drugs, it's like, so we're not like the give and take. Like we're not willing to accept what? Like, and there's a lot of studies right now. It's like the alcohol industry is hurting from legalization of weed because a lot of people are exactly what you just said. Oh, wow, I've done a lot of crazy messed up stuff on alcohol and I feel terrible the next day. But man, if I take this edible at night, I sleep real good. I wake up, I'm happy. If I take a little extra edible on the weekend, I'm laughing a little bit more with my wife. So but none of that, like you don't eat that Tyson edible if Edwin Rubis isn't in prison for 40 years.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, I get it. And like, I'm not a nightclub person, but if I were to go to a club for anything, I'd rather have an edible.
Yeah.
And someone drive than me get alcohol. And it's cheaper.
Yep.
You get a 10-pack of edibles,
Yep.
and you only need one to have a good time that night
Yep.
for like $30.
Yep.
And to have a good time at the club, you're spending like 80, 90, $100.
Oh, yeah. But that's a cheap club.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, clubs are crazy.
So-
and alcohol and bartending and like, especially me being like, I was always the male bartender. So anytime like people start getting aggressive or people, like I'm always the one having to deal with people who are angry, aggressive, like, like on the verge of like, pretty much it's like, I probably should have called the cops, but you come to my bar all the time. So I know you, so I don't want to have to do this. And it's just, like the easy part of like when I was bartending and selling weed, it was like, I was so happy on the days that I could just sit at home and smoke and like have my friends come over and smoke weed together and sell them some weed as opposed to go to my job at a bar and have to deal with, telling people like, hey, you can't drink anymore. You've had too much. Just, that's something that's like people are like, they always blame the bar. Like, oh, well, you should have cut them off. Mm-hmm. Like, have you ever tried to cut off someone who's drunk when they don't want to be cut off? Like, it's not like, this is not a pleasant experience trying to cut people off from alcohol. So, I just...
Yeah, you could go down a big rabbit hole in the pros and the cons, where it started from and everything like that. So you got those 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Where do they send you first? And do you self-surrender?
Yeah, I self-surrendered to the camp in Edgefield, South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
What was that camp like going into prison your first time?
So I got a little lucky because I was out on pretrial 2 years before I self-surrendered, right? Because it took that long for my case to go through. And they put me in like a drug class that was essentially just to make sure that I was, like around for that time. But I actually learned a lot because there was other guys in the class that had been to prison. And me, like, that's something I realized, like, before I even went to prison and then much more in prison, that prison is really cultural in the sense of, like, the people that I know, like, knew whatever. I was the only person who's been to prison or had a, like, I didn't know anybody. But then when I, got in that class, I realized like, oh, okay, I'm going to be all right. Like these guys have been to prison. They experienced prison. They're able to explain prison in the sense of, and if you're someone that is about to serve time, when you're listening to this podcast, you wonder what prison's going to be like. And I think that you can probably relate to is as bad as it is, once you get into your like daily routine and have the guys that you chill with and you're like, it's really just hanging out with your bros all day, every day. As long as you can find like a little bid to get into that you're not putting yourself on anybody's radar. I always tell people I rode through as a consumer. Like if the Puerto Ricans are making cheese sticks on the third floor, I'm gonna go pay a book and buy the cheese sticks from the Puerto Ricans, hang out with them. What's up, bro? If the black guys are from New York are making paninis on the second floor, then I'm gonna, you know what I mean? Like, and when you do that and you just cool with everybody, and I guess too, being in prison for weed is just kind of like different too, in the sense of not being a chomo and then also not being like a crazy white boy on like the white boy time that white guys are on, which if that was the thing at Fort Texas, like all the white guys would be like, oh, you got to join our car. I'm like, bro, you guys are the ones that owe 2 stores out to 2 different people. You're about to get beat up on Thursday. I know why you want me to join the white car.
It's the young white guys, though. It's not the old ones.
It's not. Yeah, exactly. The old white guys, like they're part of the white car, but they're not having that. They're just like, this is ridiculous.
Young ones that got caught up in a RICO or a gun case, and they're there and they're just moving like crazy. They have no money. And they're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. They're on drugs. They do not give a shit.
Yeah. And they're always the ones that are like, no, we got to band together. It's like, no, you want me to have to like pay to not end up in a gang war. Like, nah, you're on your own on that.
So Fort Dix is a low. How did you get from a camp to a low? Did you do something to get in trouble?
Okay. So basically I was on cell phone. I got caught. It was at the beginning of COVID. And my sister had added me to this like First Step Act group page on Facebook. And, someone got on there and was like, the BOP is saying that blah, 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 right? And when I read this, it was like 5 minutes after our unit manager had just came in and given us a spiel about what was about to happen with COVID. And it was completely different than what this person is saying. So I got on there and I'm like, okay, well, I'm in Edgefield, South Carolina right now. And this is what our unit manager just said, right? And I didn't think anything of it because I was wilding on Instagram. Like I created this account called like Prison Daddy, and I had gained like 3,200 followers in like 52 days or something like that. And it was awesome. Like, I'm like, hell yeah. Like, I'm just I'm about a year into my bid. I got, 2-3 years left, but like everybody on the internet's hitting me up. I'm going live with like a Playboy bunny girl, like just all this awesome stuff. I'm like, yeah, this is cool. And, so and they're not coming and getting me. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I can't believe no one. He's like told, like I guess my 2 best friends, G and Eli, shout out to Eli. He did my website, jeremygrovewrites.com. Awesome dude. G and Eli will be famous musician one days. They had left me, like they got caught on the phone. And I guess once they left, I was like, I kind of got to the point, honestly, where I was kind of ready for a new phase in my bid. So I just was wiling out to the point of like, I knew I was eventually going to get caught, but I just didn't want to be in Edgefield anymore. Like, and so I was going crazy like that. I didn't think that me commenting on this Facebook group was going to be the thing, but it makes sense now that I know more about the BOP. It's like, they don't care what you do as long as you don't criticize them. So I guess when I said that, there's some plant in that Facebook group that immediately like sent it to them. So the next morning they came, they're like, we saw what you posted on Facebook yesterday. I'm like, oh my God, really? That's the one? You guys don't look. And then, like I said, I was in there for a week. Right. And then I finally get another celly. The door opens. It's the kid that was like, upstairs from me, and he got there for going viral on TikTok. Like they would walk by and be like our unit manager, who was like this serious like asshole ex-military, like he was the kind of person who was trying to write you shots for not having your 6-inch fold on your bed, like that kind of like guy. He comes around, he's like, nice dance moves. I saw the video, pretty funny. It's like. So he and his name's Prison Birkin on Instagram. Mitch, he learned while he was in the shoe with me. they were giving us oranges every morning, and he would save all the oranges because they weren't edible. They were like green and like whatever. And he learned how to juggle. So he would be sitting there juggling like six oranges in our like cell. I'm like, I can't believe I'm in the cell with a circus freak. Like, what are you doing?
Why do you guys risk going live in prison? Like, I see it all the time. And when I was in prison, they went live too.
Yeah.
Obviously, TikTok wasn't as big as it is now because COVID blew that up, and I was in prison before. But guys would go live and they would be on FaceTime and stuff. What do you think is the psychology behind that? Why do guys like doing that?
I 100% know what it is. 100%. It's because you feel like the world forgot about you. You know what I mean? And the thing about it is, like, kind of going back to like the message to people that might be going back into prison is everyone else treats you as if you kind of like died or like don't exist anymore, other than maybe like the people who email you every day, like your close family members and stuff. But most people fall off, and you got to expect that. But even your family members and everything, they can't really understand that you really are like living a life in there. Like, you know, me and my friend Youngin used to spend all day like getting enough books together to get a wax paper and a cigarette so we could go smoke wax in the bathroom, and then we'd, you know, go watch TV high and watch Stephen A. Smith every morning. Like, you know, you get into that routine, you hang out with your boys, like you actually are like smiling, laughing. I wrote a blog one time, it was just called Smiling, because I remember like sitting there at commissary one day and just thinking like, you're in federal prison, it's supposed to be miserable, it's supposed to be punishment. Like, I think people on the outside just imagine you like walking around with this ball and chain and with your head down and all that. And there's definitely people that choose to experience prison that way. But you can also choose to not experience it that way. You can choose to make it just the way your life is now. And when I was sitting at commissary, I'm looking around and everybody's smiling. Everybody's like, you know, in their little group of people they know, they're laughing, they're cutting it up, they're joking. Like, you know, it's just, everything's good. Like they're happy. And is there like an underlying maybe like sadness that everybody feels in that moment? Maybe. But in that moment, you're smiling just like you would be if you were free. You're happy just like you would be when you're free. So when you take each moment and you try to be happy and you know, live your life, and just, for me, it was really just ignoring the outside, because what I realized, and that's why I say that I know that that's the answer, because when I was doing that, when I'm going live, when I'm in those moments, everything felt good, because I felt like I was back in the world. Like, wow, people on the outside know I'm here. People know on the outside see me. They see I exist. They're interested in the fact that I'm in prison. They want to see behind the scenes in prison. Like, they want to know what's going on in my life. Like, all these people on the outside, like, we're looking in again. But as soon as the phone gets taken away, they're gone, because that's their only glimpse into your life. So now you're just back in prison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that appeal of like existing again in the real world, I think that's what it is. But what kind of happens though is it makes your life a little more depressing, because you have those good moments, but in the moments you don't, like when I got the phone taken away from me when I went to the shoe, like that was like it's like a drug, like having the phone.
It really is.
Oh my God, having a phone in prison is like a drug.
That's why guys risk using the phone when there's a bad guard, because say you have a good guard, especially at a camp where there's only 100 inmates or whatever, you have a good guard for a whole quarter, and then all of a sudden you have a bad one and you got to put the phone away. That's when guys get popped, because they're so addicted.
Yes.
They got to be on it. They got to talk to their girl. They got to FaceTime. They got to do whatever they have to do.
We had a guy, there was a Foster, his name was Foster at the camp, and he was the nighttime CO, and he always did the exact same routine, which anytime a guard does that what they're telling you is I'm not going to catch you unless you are just an idiot.
Yeah, they're a sweet guard.
Yeah, like, right? But what he would do, though, sometimes is he would always make this lap. He'd always go out the door and then make the trip all the way around the fields and the you know, the buildings that had the classes and all that kind of stuff, all the way around the track, all the way around the softball field, this big loop, which means that the time he walks out the door, everyone's yelling, coming up, coming up, coming up. So you have a solid 10 minutes to get your stuff together. And then he would come up and he'd walk through, but sometimes he would just pick someone's room and just sit there. He would just sit in their room. So all the guys, like, you know, everyone would kind of be like, hey, you know, he's in here. But almost every time he did it, somebody would just not, like, they would just think, they'd be like, oh, it's been a while, he's got to be gone. They'd go get on their phone, be sitting in the room, he'd get back up, walk around, and find somebody just sitting there on their phone. They'd be like, oh man, I thought he left. Like, bro, they never like, you know, they call it. Like once they yell coming up, the lookout doesn't go back until they call clear that he's, you know, back in the thing. And like no one calls it, but guys will just kind of be like, oh, I must have missed it. Like they almost like talk themselves into it's fine because like you said, they're so addicted to it. They can't realize that it's like, no, I literally have to wait until this guard goes down. They can't do it. They're like, they just don't. They're like, oh, everything's fine. They'll just go do it.
Yeah.
It really is like that.
So you get put in the shoe after getting caught. Mm-hmm. Is that when they send you to Fort Dix after that?
Yeah. So like I originally got designated to Ashland, Kentucky, but the shoe was like, you know, it was COVID. Like I'm no transit. No, like nothing was going on. They wouldn't even take us out to rec. So I was in a cell 24 hours a day because they had showers in the cell at Edgefield. So you never left. But there's no radios. No radio and no books. No books, magazines, newspapers could get sent in, and no radio. So all you had was the book cart once a week. And and they were like strict about it where only you and your cellie, like you could each get one book. So obviously it's like both of you were like, okay, you get that book, I'll get this book. So because we're both gonna have to read it. That's why I go
through one book in one day though.
I know, and I do. Like I'm like that kind of reader. Have you ever read Shantaram by? No, it's an amazing. It's like a 900-page book. I read that 3 times because that was like the one somebody had sent it to me that had met me on the internet and was like, oh, you need to read this. But when I got it, I'm like, it's a 900-page book. Like I'm not going to read that anytime soon. But as soon as I went to the shoe and they were bringing my property, I was like, that big giant book, I need that one. And it ended up being the best book I've ever read. But like the shoe, oh my gosh. So in the shoe, me and my boy from the camp, his name's TJ, and he was always the one on the range being asked like, yo, TJ, can you do, you know, whatever. So, and everybody's fishing with him. Well, he decides one day, he's like, I'm not going to be called TJ anymore. I'm not answering unless you refer to me as Pussy Destroyer. Right? So everybody in the shoe's like, I'm not calling no grown man Pussy Destroyer. Fuck that. I'm not doing it. There's no way. Like, I'm never calling you Pussy Destroyer. Like, whatever. So then, you know, yo, TJ, shoot your line down. We need to do. No answer. Yo, Jeremy, can you call TJ, see if he's asleep? I'm like, yo, he told you he's not answering you unless you call him Pussy Destroyer. They're like, we're not calling him Pussy Destroyer. I'm like, hey, Pussy Destroyer. He's like, what? So the whole rest of the time we're in the shoe, he's Pussy Destroyer. And at first I was Big Germ, just because I'm big and my name's Jeremy. Then in the shoe, I just grew out my hair and my beard. So I became Big Perm Germ. And then one time I was talking about these crazy long-term plans. So then I became long-term Big Perm Germ. So every night in the shoe, like this was like almost like what you're doing, like podcast style, right? After 10:30 count, which you know in prison, like you are not supposed to be making noise after 10:30. We'd get under the door and I'd go, Pussy Destroyer. And then he would go, long-term Big Perm Germ, like wrestling, you know what I mean? And then we would start talking shit to each other about other dudes in the range and like their nicknames. Like we had Bustle the Muscle and, you know, like all these different characters. And we would talk about like what their matchup would be like in the cage, and the whole range would be laughing. And we'd keep telling these like same, like the one dude, Kyle, we call him Chicken Dick because we were going on a hunger strike, right? It's hot. Like the one side of the range, the air conditioning broke. It's like 95 degrees, middle of summer during COVID. And so we decided to go on a hunger strike. Breakfast comes. Everyone's like, fuck that. You know, they have to mark it down, right? Lunch gets there. All the first, like, fuck that. Like, so the guy's just rolling down, like marking like whatever. Gets halfway down the range. Our boy Kyle, who was like, you know, we went to the camp with him. We're talking shit with him every night. Tray opens. Food goes in. We're like, what is wrong with you? He's like, so he doesn't answer. Like for like days, he's not answering. So finally, like we're just roasting him. We're like, yeah, well, Kyle took the fucking chicken. Like, what's wrong with you? We were gonna like, like we were ever gonna change what they were gonna do with COVID. Like, you know what I'm saying? But he became like the person to blame of like now why everything sucks is because Kyle took the chicken, even though it's like it just sucked anyway. But it became Kyle took the chicken. So one time he's like, you know what? I'm sick of you guys. Like always bringing up that I took the chicken. I love chicken. It's chicken day. It's the one day I look forward to. I love everything about the chicken. And this guy, Big Country, he's a Big Sandy right now. Hell. He goes, even the dick? He said he loved every part of the chicken. So he became Chicken Dick. So he was Chicken Dick Kyle, right? So we're calling him Chicken Dick. And all these guys would always like send him notes like, you can't let them call you Chicken Dick. That's like degrading you. Like, you know how prison is. Like, they're not respecting you, all that shit. But it's like, we're all in the shoe. Like, nobody can do nothing. Like, all there is talking. So he gets mad. So we tell him, all right, listen, the only way you cannot be Chicken Dick anymore is when the next time it's chicken day, you got to take the tray, throw it at the guard and say, I don't want to be Chicken Dick anymore. So he does it. Like, and you got to think, like, we're in the shoe. There's nothing exciting. Mm-hmm. So we all know that this is his plan on like a Thursday. So like everybody's up on the door. Everybody's like, wait, like everybody's like, wait, like, you know, and the guard has no idea. And then luckily it happened to be the guard everyone hated. Like he was just the one that like, oh my God, he was such a dickhead. He was the guy, you know what his problem was? He'd walk through at 6 a.m. at breakfast and just talk loud, like wake everybody up on, like, you know how breakfast is, like a lot of guys are not trying to wake up. No one's trying to like, He's just being loud on purpose just to be a dickhead. So the flap opens and Kyle just throws the chicken. He's like, what the fuck? They fucking rip him out, take him to the fucking box, all that shit, just so we wouldn't call him Chicken Dick anymore. It was like me and my boy TJ, we still talk about it to this day. We're like, no one else because a lot of people were stuck in the shoe during COVID all over the feds, but no one had as much fun in the shoe as we did at Edgefield, because every single night we made sure everyone was laughing and having a good time.
Yeah, that's really all you got.
That's all you got. That's all you got.
You have to talk in between the cells and the vents and everything like that. Oh
yeah, like I said, I wrote that whole article, like, because Sean was in a cell. You know how you rotate every 21 days, but you're not necessarily rotating the same as somebody else. So a lot of times you're you're next to somebody for a week, or the next time you might be 3 weeks, or the next time might be 2 days. So I was next to him for like 2 weeks, and I'm talking about every day in the vent with my legal pad, like writing down every little thing about his story and all that. Like, it's amazing, like what you can accomplish in something where it's like when people see like what a shoe cell looks like, you're like, okay, you're not doing anything with your life.
The size of this room.
Yeah, you're like, you're not doing anything with your life in there. And it's like, yeah, you can literally make your life in there.
You could also go crazy.
You can.
You really have to prepare your mind, because once you get in there, it's like, it's very claustrophobic, and you just kind of go crazy because you don't know what the time is, and but once you get through, I think the first week, it's okay.
One of my favorite things to do, and I still like, I have a whole list of guys I was in the shoe with, and whenever I get the least bit like down, or I just feel like, like whatever with my life, I go and order one of them a copy of my book, because I wrote it while I was in there with them. And like, I always said it's like a group, like the shoe during COVID was like a group message you can't leave. Like, no matter whether you involved in the group message or not, you were having to read every message. Like, you definitely knew what was going on in the group message. Like, you weren't ignoring the fact that like Chicken Dick was getting ridiculed every single day. Just, all like, it was like, I really feel like, and guys said it too. Guys would like, they're basically like, you made that work like better for us. Like, just being able to take a situation and make the best of it. Because it's just like, what else are you going to, like you said, like, you really can go crazy. Like, and you just have to make the choice of just keep your personality, keep laughing, keep, just keep fighting through it, accomplish things, like make it the best experience of your life. really has to be. If it's not the best experience of your life, it's definitely going to be the worst.
Were guys getting sick in there too because of COVID in the shoe, or what?
So that was the crazy thing. Like the whole time we're in the shoe, they're telling us like, "Oh, don't worry, you're safer in here than you are out there." Blah blah blah. And we're just thinking like, okay, but if you all die, what? Like, who's coming and opening the door? But the other thing about it is just like, they kept telling us that. So then they finally get us to Atlanta, which, did you go through Atlanta Transit at all in your travels?
No, I went to Oklahoma City.
I spent a month in Oklahoma too.
It's brutal.
Brutal. Were they smoking mad deuce there?
Somewhat. It was a lot of like, cartel guys that were heading to Texas, like maximum security prisons. That's what it was, face tattooed and everything else.
Yeah.
And the white guys are the minority, but they can't really do anything to you because there's no paperwork or anything in these.
Oh, you went through Oklahoma though, non-COVID. I didn't like we only got 5 cells got out at a time for 30 minutes at a time, 5 days a week while I was there.
Open all day.
Yeah, so it was only 5 cells getting out at a time. So it wasn't the same. Like that's a very, very, very different scenario. Being in an open dorm in Oklahoma, I can see why that would be scary.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I was at the end of that was the last time I was in transit, because then from there I went to Chicago after that, and then I was in Chicago for 2 weeks, MDC, and then I finally went to Wisconsin for the last year. But being in transit sucks. Everything about that sucks. I think being in the 2-man cells it was the worst.
Oh yeah,
just being locked in a cell.
Just the fact that I'm comfortable like taking a shit in front of another man. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? Like, just, like, the degrading nature of, like, literally every time because at least when you were in Oklahoma, it was like you were out, so if you took a shit, you could just probably pull your door shut and be by yourself.
I always tried to wait till, it was the next morning. I mean, there were instances in the beginning, where you got to go, but I tried to always wait.
Well, no, I know, but I'm saying when you're in the shoe, like, when you're locked in the shoe, like I was like, there's no, like, you're in the, you have to.
Yeah. You don't have a choice, unless he goes to rec in the morning. I would always skip rec.
Okay, you skip rec so you can take it. Okay. That's see, there was no rec during COVID. That was it. You were doing that.
So you did 11 months in solitary.
Basically, so I did 8. Well, I always call it 11 because I did 8 at Edgefield. Then I did 2 in Atlanta, but Atlanta at that point was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 20 minutes out of the cell to shower, phone. Like, you only had 20 minutes, and you had to pick between shower, phone line, or email. That's it. 3 days a week. And then it was also subject to, like, just whenever they felt like, oh, well, we can't do it today, we're not going to do it. So there was definitely times where we'd go Monday to Monday, not getting out of the cell, no shower, and they didn't give you anything but the jumpsuit and the boxers. Like, no clothes other than...
They really put you through torture for something that's nonviolent, like for a phone,
Oh, absolutely.
Literally, the phone thing is ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I know now they're giving tablets, like you go on social media.
Which that's a really good thing too, because I've always felt like that. Like, if guys had the option of tablets, the cell phone thing would be less of a thing. You got to be it's in this, like, the concept they're trying to say, like, rehabilitation, to stay in touch with your family. Like, you got to be able to FaceTime with your kids in 2024. Like, things like that. They're monitored, all that kind of thing. The tablets are a no-brainer. They should have been done that.
Well,
but
give them social media, Yeah. I think you're taking away sex from them. You're taking away, like, those freedoms.
Is there any way I can go to the bathroom?
Yeah, you can take a bathroom break.
Okay, all
right, so you get, you do the 11 months between transit and at the camp. Mm-hmm. Then you end up at Fort Dix.
I end up at Fort Dix in February of 2021. And so we get to so, like I said, for 11 months we've been told, like, you're better off where you are because of COVID and blah 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 blah, and that's why you're locked in a cell. So they put us all on a plane, take us to Fort Dix, and it was oh my gosh, that, like, it's such a crazy time in your bid when you're in transit, because there's part of you that's excited because you're seeing the real world. Like, there's, like, obviously the first thing you're like, oh my God, get to see tits for the first time in forever. You know what I mean? Like, even when you're, like, driving by a girl that's, like, hot, everybody's like, look at that, there's a hot girl. So just everyone knows, when you see a jail bus drive by, that is, like, flash your tits, okay?
Well, the Fed ones are indiscreet. They look like sports buses. It's the orange stripe and the white stripe or whatever on it. Yeah.
Basically, if you see a bus, just flash. Just in case. Let the guys have a little fun. Anyway, so, but, like, being shackled, like, oh my gosh, like, that, and I'm so glad I wasn't a black boxer, because that is crazy. But so it's like part of you is excited because, you know, it's something new, and in prison you don't get a lot of that. But the being shackled and just, you know, spending from about, they shackle you about 4 or 5 in the morning, and then we didn't get to Fort Dix until, they didn't unshackle us till 10 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? And just having that on the whole time. You're trying to eat like the little boxed, like, which, I mean, I guess it was probably the least hungry I've ever been in my life, really, that day. Like the nerves and just everything going through you. But trying to eat airplane boxes, like shackled and all that, is definitely a crazy experience. But it was so exciting to finally see the end of 11 months of being locked in a cell and ending up at Fort Dix. So we get to Fort Dix, and when you were there, was 58, was RDAP, you were on the other side.
Well, you go to the west side first.
Okay.
So RDAP was the A&O building.
Okay.
Where you stay that first week until you get shipped to the other side.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the first week they had us in that building, right there across from commissary.
Yep. That's where I was.
Yep. So they put us in there on the 3rd floor. Well, there's like 2 dudes, this dude, Josh and Jeremy, like his name was also Jeremy, and TJ. So I'm still with TJ, still Pussy Destroyer. Pussy Destroyer and long-term Big Perm Germ, we're still together. So we're like the 4 of us are playing cards every day together. Like, you know, we're all hanging out. The Josh dude, he was going to be at Fort Dix for a while. We were designated to the same unit. So I'm like, okay, we're going to be friends, you know, all that kind of thing. And then 4 days later, they come in, they take them because they tested positive for COVID when they got there. And now at this point, I'm sick. So they come and test me. They take me out of there. So for 11 months, I'm being kept like in a cage because I'm being kept safe from COVID. And then the second they let me out, they give me COVID. I'm like, wow, like you could have just given me COVID 11 months ago and just let me go. But I feel like a lot of people feel that way about, like, COVID is a very controversial issue. And to be honest with you, this is what, because people like, it was absolutely terrible to be in prison during COVID. And as much as people try to say like, oh, well, we were in prison out here. No, you weren't. And everybody in prison was in much worse prison for years after COVID, because it's really taken until now for really a lot of the restrictions and things to come off. But that being said, like COVID, that like the logistics of trying to deal with a disease in a prison setting, there just isn't like a way. There's no way to keep a disease like that from spreading in that environment. It is, you know, I understand that it's like you're required to like do everything you can to stop it, but there's just no logical way to do it. Like, it's not, you know, obviously everybody in there's I'm like one of those people where it's like, okay, like I understand we're all not happy, but what is the solution? Like what can you come up with where it's like, okay, in a perfect world, we do this, and then there just isn't one. And it's like, we're all in prison. It's a disease that gets spread from air. Like what are you going to do? There's just no way. So anyway, I get COVID when I get there, which put me in 5811. Because that was like the unit where, because what they were doing then is like they would just put everybody that had COVID in the same unit. So now we're all have COVID, but then once we got off quarantine, which means like the cases is whatever, like they're testing you every day, all this stuff. All these numbers changed every day. Like everything about COVID changed every day. The rules, the way it was enforced, like whether they cared, didn't care. You still had like, there was a guy at the end of my bid. This is January of 2023. He would still like stand it. Like we called him the put your mask on guy. He was like in the cafeteria and would just like, you're eating food. And he would be like, you have to have your mask on, like, anytime you're not eating food. It's like, so you walk in, you're in line, you have to keep it on. You sit down, and then you can only take it down while you eat, and then you have to put it up while you're chewing. It's like, what in the world?
That's like on airplanes, what people dealt with. Yeah, that's what they wanted you to do.
Like how do you do this? Yeah. So anyway, that whole experience with it. But
give us like a great, like crazy story from Fort Dix.
Okay, Fort Dix.
Like your top one from your time there.
Well, on a bad note was definitely like the prison got real to me because Fort Dix, like at the camp, there was no violence really at all. But one of my best friends at Fort Dix, like he was getting his hair cut and the guy came up and stabbed him in the eye. And then he was running around the unit like trying to get someone to give him a knife with the knife still in his eye. So it was literally like a horror movie. Like I'm talking about blood just like going down his face. And like he just looked crazy. Like, and he's just like, someone give me a knife. And we're just like, no. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, what? And it was crazy. It took him up, and the guards were out on the track talking. So there was no guard in the building, and nobody wanted to be the one to like yell out to the guard that someone had gotten stabbed. But he's like you know, he's literally bleeding everywhere. Like oh my gosh, there was blood on every floor of the.
Why did he get stabbed?
Cell phone, like something about cell phone. Like he didn't even the guy. I guess the guy thought he was trying to steal the phone, but he wasn't. And it turned out that like it was all like a misunderstanding is really what it turned out. It was all just a misunderstanding. And like basically I think somebody had rented the phone and then he had used the phone and like logged in his Facebook. And then so his Facebook was on the guy's phone and then somebody else tried to like steal it. And then when the guy got it back, he saw that the Facebook was logged in and thought that he had tried to steal it, but it wasn't. It was just his Facebook had stayed logged in from before kind of situation, like something like that. So yeah, they stabbed him.
What ended up happening to him?
He was in the shoe. Well, first he got like airlifted out of there. They said that, you know, the thing was literally a millimeter away from killing him. Like that's how far, yeah. Okay, so here's another crazy thing about it though, is he's like super into like Santeria and crazy stuff like that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And he had told me like a week or two before that he knew he was gonna only have one eye. And then like a week later, he got stabbed through the eye, and I was just like, okay, that's wild. Like,
holy
yeah,
fuck. Yeah. Like Fort Dix it's definitely a big economy. It's very chill, but it can also because you're mixing with so many violent people too.
See what was happening at the end is they since Biden closed the private prisons, which is where all the Mexican gang.
The ICE prisons.
Yeah, the ICE prison. Yeah, they closed them down. Those private prisons, which were basically all that. So Fort Dix got flooded. Like when I first got to 12, the Mexican TV room had like a Puerto Rican and a Venezuelan who would sit there and you know hang out. Like there was no Mexicans. And then by the time I left, every single day, all day long was like a fiesta in that thing. They had tables, they got the spreads out. They were like, and then when I went, and that's one of the reasons when I went to RDAP, I went because like at night you could hear people ripping like metal off the walls and like sharpening stuff. And like things were getting real tense in there because essentially now the Mexicans were taking over an economy that was ran by the people that had been running it at Fort Dix forever. And now all of a sudden, like having the Mexicans come in, now they're outnumbering any one group. You know what I mean? Like it was, and they're just coming. You know how Fort Dix is like whatever like your things is like that's your thing, and no one's really allowed to like step in on that, whether it's selling deuce or hooch or like whatever. And the Mexicans were just coming in and just selling everything cheaper, and it was, and you could just. And that's what happened after I left. Like when I went to Fort Dix, like my unit, like 58, 12, like someone got killed. Like yeah, it got real bad. It became like a war zone. It was bad.
Crazy.
It was bad.
So how long do you end up doing? 4 years on the 5?
Yeah, I self-surrendered March of 2019, and I got out January of 2023. So
and you're still on
4 years.
Supervised release now?
I am, but I should be getting off of probation soon. I'm going to apply for early release off of probation, and my probation officer said they're not going to fight it, so I should be able to get off early.
Are they cool with like travel and everything like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, he knows what I do, and he's, you know, he's a reasonable person. You know, as long as I follow the rules that are set in front of me, he's a reasonable human being. I think, you know, whatever people, the issue, like the way I see it is like what I went to prison for is a young old. Like weed is more of a young old thing than a red white or like Republic or police or not police. Like people that are young, like even if they don't smoke weed or they can't because of their job or whatever, they also like have friends that do all the time. So they're certainly not like passionately like trying to put you back in prison because, you know, you're pro weed. And also, you know, it's just, they know I'm not selling weed anymore, which is really the only thing that I was doing illegal is, you know, like we talked about earlier, I was making the personal choice to break a law. But on a macro scale, if nobody breaks that law, it'll never get changed.
Yeah. What do they think about, like, probation officers think about you guys going to do podcasts and stuff? Because this is like a new world for them.
Honestly, like he's pretty for it. Like he thinks it's cool that I think I got that kind of impression. He thinks like he's happy that I think like I have my probation officer is a good person who is happy. I think he seems like he's genuinely happy that I'm doing well in life and making a difference and being someone who got out of prison and is changing the world for a better.
Yeah,
and
having those probation officers are huge.
Absolutely.
Because there are shitty ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I 100% feel like both of them, because I've had two, they both treated me like a person. They both understood the things I went to prison for, my beliefs. You know, they also have kept the rules that they're required to keep, but they've never been, you know, a dick for any reason or overly anything. They're just good, you know, people that do their job. I'm, you know, obviously like I would never choose that job, but if that's your job, you should do it to the way you do it. And they do a good job to me. They don't really mess with me much. I'm able to do what I need to do.
What do you think are the biggest takeaways you want people to learn from your story?
That you don't have to have your story be what everyone else thinks it should be. Your story is your story, and you should be proud of your story, however you experience it and whatever you believe in. And you got to be careful not to impart your own judgment on morality. Like one of the Pussy Destroyer words of wisdom is like morality is subjective, which can be a controversial thing to say. But in reality, it is reality. Like my example with that is like, if you go to the Middle East, like what is and isn't acceptable based on their moral standards is drastically different than in America. Now, does my own moral standard much more align with an American normal standard? Of course. But that doesn't mean that I'm right or they're wrong or everything, because that's all in the eye of the beholder based on your own perspective and your own morality. So I think that people should, whatever like it is that feel like you're put on earth for this purpose, once you have that moment where you look inside of yourself and you find what your purpose is, don't let anybody talk you out of it. Because that's what you're here for. And it doesn't have to be anyone else's, and it doesn't have to be what everyone else thinks you should do.
Well said. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming today, man.
Thanks to you too.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. Love your energy and you know, keep on rocking, doing what you're doing.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. You got to check out that video that me and Travis did too.
Yeah, he sent it to me. I'll check that out.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, we did a lot of like man on the street type interviews, you know, asking people if they knew people were in prison that long. But yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, keep rocking, bro.
Hell yeah.